Hey everybody, Steve Bertoni from Forbes, here with Rafael Ilishayev, founder and co-CEO of GoPuff. Raf, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So I want to talk about three big things that shaped you from being in your dorm room at Drexel to raising $3 billion and turning GoPuff into like a delivery empire.
The first couple of things was a matter of faith, right? We didn't raise any money in the beginning. One, because we were young, and two, we didn't know about any fundraising opportunities. The fact that we didn't raise money for the first 2.5 years forced us to figure out the business from the ground up. It forced us to be profitable from day one. It forced us to figure out the unit economics and figure out this mantra, really nail it, and then scale it. So the concept of going really deep in something rather than wide, and then expanding to additional business opportunities. And I think those lessons early on kind of shaped us to who we are today and how we grew. I think another big lesson learned is, hire very slowly and fire quickly. A lot of people don't like to talk about this, but no one's batting average is perfect. And you make mistakes, and when a mistake is made, it's important to own up to it. It's important to be really transparent, and also know when it's important to say goodbye. And obviously doing it in a meaningful, correct, and human way. But sometimes things are not a perfect fit, and you need to say goodbye faster rather than slower. And I think the last piece is really figuring out, how do you make sure the values of your business align with your own internal values and then the people that you hire, right? I think people are divided into two natural categories: people that are naturally inclined to be arrogant, people that are naturally inclined to be humble. We built all of our values on the latter. When you hire against those values, it almost always leads to disaster. So, making sure your values align with your partners, with your employees, with everyone that's around your business, it pays dividends. And when it doesn't, it's kind of a recipe for disaster.
I like that you said before, nail it, then scale it. I'm definitely going to steal that, by the way. But tell me about how you shifted your mindset, because you said you guys were super gritty, profitable to the extent that your co-founder and you were sleeping and living in the warehouses. Then suddenly you raised a ton of money and it's about growth. So how does that change? Like, that must change your whole mindset, your whole almost like constitution. Like, tell me about that adjustment.
Yeah, it was tough. Steve, very, very, very tough. And it started with a little bit of money, and the money started growing more and more as we started operationally executing better. We had a couple of principles. The one thing is, we knew we had something really, really special in our hands, and we didn't want to share it with the world until we were ready to share it with the world. So between 2013 and the end of 2018, we really had no PR about us. It was very much by design. We said, hey, even as we're growing and as we're learning, as we're making mistakes, there's no reason to talk about ourselves yet, because we're not in a state where we felt like the business was ready to be talked about and we were defensible enough. But the adjustment was hard. But what we knew is that we're going to build a truly generational business, one that's going to kind of transcend even what we thought was the initial use case. We're going to have to continue to grow. And GoPuff doesn't matter to someone if GoPuff is not there, right? Like, GoPuff was great to the people in Philly and Boston and Washington, D.C. and Austin pre-fundraise, but anyone in California or New York or Florida or Texas are like, who cares about GoPuff? GoPuff's not here. So the first thing we had to do is, how do we open a massive amount of MFCs in a profitable way?
So what's an MFC?
A micro-fulfillment center.
Okay.
So that's what we call each one of our buildings or facilities.
Gotcha.
And as we open up more and more MFCs, right, the problems started getting more and more complex, right? How do you manage the inventory in each one of these MFCs, and the driver operations, and the binning and batching inside the MFCs, the routing for the multiple stops that gets the order, the consumer app, and the localities of each one of those MFCs. The assortment needs to be different. So the complexity got more and more difficult, and then we threw a massive wrench on it with alcohol, right? Alcohol is a very state-by-state issue. We realized this our customer.
Alcohol complicates everything, always.
Yes. Yeah. For better or for worse, it's something that our consumers really wanted. So it added a fair degree of complexity into the business and a lot more tech on making sure that orders are compliant. We're IDing at the time of order. Some states you have to ID before the order is placed. So, I think one other tenet, to actually answer your previous question, is kind of doing whatever you can for the customer, right? We launched our kitchens business. We talked about this with you, Steve, because that's what our customers wanted. We launched our alcohol business because that's what customers wanted. So obsessing over like the details in the consumer experience I think is another kind of key to success for us, especially really early on.
When you were getting going, a lot of tech companies were trying to be super capital light, basically to own as few things as possible and just use the software to maximize it. You went another direction, a very contrarian direction at the time, is opening real estate, running these micro distributors, these micro kind of warehouses. Tell me about that decision, and I'm sure what did people say in the business when you were doing that? You're going the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing.
Kira and I have two immigrant parents. We're immigrants ourselves who taught us really basic principles when we were kids. And I think the most simple one, right, them both being business owners, is business needs to make money. Don't do something if it doesn't make money, and it's very core. Besides even solving a consumer problem, solving a consumer problem is one side of the equation. Business needs to make profit. So at its core, the 1P business, right, being the 3P business, the asset light business, it just didn't make sense for us. It solved the consumer problem, but it's not a business that made any money. So we said we need a business that has enough gross margin dollars to be profitable, and the easy path's not always the right path, right? It's not easy opening up micro fulfillment centers. It's not easy building out all the technology in there and the inventory management and all the problems that you need to solve for the consumer and the consumer app and the intricacies around all the regulations on all your regulated products. But the reality is we knew it was the right way. So it took us a lot of years, but we're now in all of the top 100 DMAs in the US. We're in almost all of them in the UK. And we're continuing to expand for the consumer every single day. But it took a lot of years of trial and error, of getting it wrong before you get it right. And again, it wasn't the easy path, but it's the right path. And it's the right path for the customer, it's the right path for profitability.
And real quick, how does operating these fulfillment centers yourself, how does that help profitability? How does that help your margin?
So you essentially cut out the middleman, right? So you are, besides being a tech company that has the consumer app and all the technology, you're also the retailer. So when you're delivering from a store, delivering from a restaurant, you have to share the margin with the restaurant owner, right? Or the store that's delivering it. And historically, low gross margin categories like alcohol, high gross margin dollars but low gross margin percentages, it's already tough to make money, right? Now you're making a tough business that's already tough to make money that much harder. Because you're sharing margin with someone else. So by being the retailer, you're starting off with a much higher gross margin percentage than anyone else.
Gotcha.
And the kind of the physical OpEx, right? I'm talking about the CapEx. The payback on investment is very, very fast. So like traditional retail, usually paid back in like 4, 5, 6 years. A GoPuff building is paid back in a fraction of that. And once you get volume into a building, the operating costs to start, kind of scaling. So we've proven out, kind of in our most mature markets that this business is very, very profitable. Even if you look at us from the beginning of the year till now, contribution margins improved by 350%. As the building ages, it gets more order volume and becomes more and more profitable kind of over time.